Started since this is lunch. My script says good morning, but it's good afternoon now. So welcome to the second session of the NCLUG OpenX week. Hopefully you were able to attend the morning session. If not, it will be posted online on NCLUG site relatively soon. It's not instantaneously available, folks. Please remember that. It takes time to download these and make sure that they are presentable, so to speak, and do work. So check back tomorrow. Hopefully some of them should be available. I'm Randy Robinson, for those of you who don't know me. I actually work for CADD Services, so I got lucky to moderate this. A few quick housekeeping things. First, please mute your mic if you're not already muted. Second, please feel free to submit any questions you want via the chat window. We will either answer them as they come up, or we will take some time at the end, depending on the presentation's length, to handle them. As I said earlier, the presentation will be recorded and be made available on the NCLUG website. So if you miss it or want to share it with somebody, please feel free to take them there. PDH credits are offered to anybody attending. Again, there'll be a link on the website, or you will receive it in your email telling you what you need to do afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ethan Schwartz. Ethan is our in-house Bentley consultant at NCDOT. He specializes in microstation ORD, and he's going to give two quick little presentations on using the workspace and some tips and hints on how to use AccuDraw. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Ethan.
Well, thank you, Randy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the NCLUG discussions. I'd like to talk to you today about workspaces, and then we're going to cover some civil AccuDraw, like Randy said. We're going to start out talking about workspaces, and I'm going to define some terminology you may be hearing. Then we're going to talk about where do you find the latest NCDOT workspace for ORD. I'd like to talk about what the difference is between a managed and an unmanaged workspace, and we're going to talk about how you can load an unmanaged workspace. We'll talk about self-paced training courses that are available. We'll also talk about where you can get some help from NCDOT. And then I'll finish up with a quick demonstration about how you can use civil AccuDraw for precision placement. So let's start with what is a workspace. You may hear that term thrown around quite a lot, but what does it mean? In OpenRoads Designer, we call the collection of configurations and standards that users rely on to create their designs the workspace. Configurations point to where the standards and settings reside, and the standards and settings are a preset group for the NCDOT design process. These are the settings that allow users to design in OpenRoads Designer while keeping within NCDOT's parameters, and finally to create a set of NCDOT plans. The same workspace is also used for OpenBridge Designer and Modeler. And the way that works is the structures unit has worked up a portion of the workspace to cover their specific needs with OpenBridge software. Each discipline within NCDOT has a CAD coordinator who's been working on the standards for that unit's part of the workspace. And CAD Services is responsible then for the configurations of those standards and maintaining the general NCDOT standards that are shared by all the units. So how do you know if you're using the correct version of the software? Well, if you go to the CAD Services webpage and scroll down to the bottom, you'll find a link to the NCDOT CAD software versions. If you click on that link, it'll take you to a PDF of the latest version of that NCDOT is using for their design of the projects. This is what that looks like. As you can see, there's still some older versions of software being used, and that's just to finish up projects previously started for the state. Bentley just released the latest version of ORD, so we've not fully moved to that version just yet, but it's coming soon, so keep checking here for when it's the current NCDOT version. Additionally, all projects are being moved to or created in ProjectWise Explorer, so you'll want to download version 10.00.03.453 of the ProjectWise Explorer client from Bentley to access and work on your projects in the NCDOT data source. To move a project to ProjectWise, the project manager should contact dot.pwsupport@ncdot.gov. I'll put that email up at the end of this workspace presentation. By working on your projects in ProjectWise, you get the benefit of using what we call the managed workspace. So let's define what that is. What is the managed workspace? Well, the managed workspace is just what it sounds like. When projects are accessed through ProjectWise, all NCDOT standards are automatically applied to the DGN files. No workspace installation is necessary on the user's part. And the way it works is the first time you open a file, it's going to download the latest version of the NCDOT workspace to your local machine, and ProjectWise will do all the work of keeping those standards up to date as you move forward with your design. Not all projects have been associated with the managed workspace at this point, though. If you're working on a previously started project that does not have a managed workspace associated, please contact CADD services so we can help set that project up with the managed workspace. So what's an unmanaged workspace then? Well, we're aware that there will be situations where projects are going to be worked on outside of ProjectWise for various reasons. For those situations, we'll provide an unmanaged workspace that users can download in zip format from the CADD services webpage, and they can install and manage the workspace themselves. This zip file will be updated on a regular basis with any updates the managed workspace has. The user will then have to go out, get the latest version themselves, and swap it out for the old workspace on their local drive or wherever it's installed. This is not the preferred method of design, as the project won't be on ProjectWise, and it'll be up to the users themselves to make sure all CAD standards are the latest version and up to date. So where can I get a copy of the workspace for my own design? Well, the good news is when you're working on a project through ProjectWise, the managed workspace is applied as you open the files. ProjectWise will download the local copy to your machine, and as the workspace gets updated on ProjectWise, the software will compare it to what you have locally and update any files as needed each time you open a design file. It all happens behind the scenes, and the user does not have to worry about any of it. To access all the ProjectWise has to offer, talk to your IT administrator about setting up the NCDOT data source listing and have the project manager set up your access permissions through SharePoint. After that, you should be able to log into ProjectWise using your Bentley IMS login and see your projects listed in the data source. If you haven't used ProjectWise yet, please contact CADD services for any assistance. At this point, we encourage everyone to work on all projects through ProjectWise. We know that can't always be the case, so we do provide the zip file you can download and install. Let's take a quick look at how that works. So where do you go to find this zip file? If you go to the CADD services webpage, and if you haven't been there before, please take a look around. It's a great place to find information and resources for NCDOT project design. But if you scroll down the page, at the bottom on the right-hand side, you'll find CADD downloads. This is where you can download the latest NCDOT Connect workspace. The numbers that show up at the end of the listing correspond to the version number of the workspace and the date which it was posted to the page, so you can keep checking back to make sure you've got the latest version. The zip file is updated regularly when changes are made to the workspace. Go ahead and click on the link and your browser should start downloading the zip file containing the updated workspace. Once you've downloaded the zip, you can extract it to your C drive. If your IT administrator prefers to place the workspace someplace other than the C drive, they'll need to fix the configuration files for the new location. It's recommended that the workspace be placed directly on the C drive. So you browse to that drive and select it as the folder to extract the contents of the zip file. And then by hitting the extract button, you'll place the needed configuration files and standards where they need to be placed. And then some of the files installed with the software will be overwritten with modified versions that are configured for this workspace location. You should now see the NCDOT Connect Workspace folder on your C drive. When you open OpenRoads Designer from any shortcut, you should be able to find the DOT-US North Carolina option in the Workspace dropdown. From there, it should just be a matter of selecting or creating a work set for the project you're designing and pick a role to set your discipline. Now, I'll warn everybody now, when you select a role, you'll need to open a file and then get fully out of the software and back in, selecting the same role again for it to fully load. This has to do with how the configurations are loaded and when they are loaded. And for now, it's just a quirk of the software that we're going to have to work around. Since the workspace is unmanaged by ProjectWise, the user will need to keep the standards up to date themselves. The steps the user must take each time they want to update an unmanaged workspace to the latest version are as follows. Download the latest zip file from CADD services, then go ahead and delete any current or previous versions of the unmanaged workspace from your computer. You'll then extract the new version from the zip file directly to the C drive, and you can use the shortcuts provided within the zip file or any other shortcut from the Start menu to access OpenRoads Designer. Now, we do recommend cleaning off older workspaces before loading new workspaces. This is done by deleting the overall folder that contains the workspace on the C drive. In this case, the NCDOT_connect_workspace folder. We recommend that you delete those off before extracting the new workspace from the downloaded zip file. This just makes sure that all the files get replaced and any unneeded files are not left behind. So where can I go to find some training on OpenRoads Designer and how NCDOT wants me to use it for design? Well, let me bring up. Here's the CADD services webpage. There are many places to find OpenRoads Designer training, both in general and in specific to NCDOT designs, standards and design. And we're trying to keep all these documented in one location, so it's much easier for the user to find what they need. So on the CADD services webpage, at the top is a link for the OpenRoads Designer. If we go there, this is going to be the OpenRoads Designer page. If we scroll down, on the right side, we've got NCDOT ORD implementation training links. When I click on that, it brings up another PDF. This is a PDF that Vaseem has been working on, keeping everything in one place for us, so it's easy to find any information you need. There's a nice table of contents at the beginning. We show past NCLUG presentations. Then we get into some Bentley specific training, and these are all customized learning paths that we've set up for each of the different disciplines. Then we come to the unit specific training. And if any of the disciplines have posted their training yet, Vaseem has put a link into it so you can easily get to it. Lastly, we go over some conversion some conversion suggestions and resources at the end of the document. So please take a look at this document. It will be updated. Keep checking back regularly. And again, this should be on the OpenRoads Designer page from CADD Resources. Now, where do you go to get help? If things aren't working quite the way you expect, if you need any assistance along your journey, you can always contact CADD Services with questions. The email address listed here on this page, the email address is listed on this page. You can also contact ProjectWise support with any ProjectWise related questions at the address shown here. These emails get sent out to multiple people within CAD services, so this is really the best chance of getting the quickest response to questions and concerns. We've had some folks that direct people, individuals directly with questions, which is fine, but if you'd like to include either the CAD support CAD support email or the ProjectWise support email, your question will go to more people at once, and you got a better chance of getting it answered quickly. Questions on workspaces up to this point? Anything I can answer on that? I'm going to switch over here. We're going to take a look at Civil AccuDraw next. We good so far?
Ethan, I mean, do you want to take a few questions real quick?
Sure. Does anybody have questions about workspace, managed, unmanaged? Non-managed, I'm sorry.
Where was that place that you was talking about where you said that you had to close it out and reopen it to get it to work?
When you get into a file here, let me close this and I'll show you. When you get into a file, it's going to ask you to select your workspace and your work set. And then we've got a third option now for roles. And these represent the different disciplines. If you decide that you want to change a role, you have to get into a file and then get completely out of the software, then get back in with that same role for it to fully load that role. Does that make sense? So if I wanted to switch to hydraulics, I would have to get into a file. It would partially load that hydraulics role. At this point, I would then have to completely exit the software and get back in. This might take a few seconds here. Now I can leave it set to that, and when I get in to the file again, that role should be fully loaded. And what happens is the configuration for roles is further down this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but it's further down the configuration stack. So you've already loaded some configurations. By the time you pick your role, you have to finish and go back to the start of that to have it load completely.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Great. Any other questions before I continue?
Let's see, there is a question in chat. So for a new project, will we need to contact CAD support to set it up in ProjectWise? What about the files on SharePoint we receive from other consultants?
Good questions. I might hold off on ProjectWise questions until Elizabeth has her presentation. She is the ProjectWise expert. I'm really the ORD guy. Unless anybody else on here has a good explanation for how that's going to work.
And Ethan, I think that's fair. Like I said, let's wait the 2:30 session this afternoon. Elizabeth Lee will be leading that discussion, and she's helping us out all things project-wise. So I think that'd be a good call.
Okay, we'll hold off on that one. Next question is, how is the role selected utilizing
managed workspace? So that's within ProjectWise then, depending on which folder you pull the file from, it's going to set the discipline based on the folder.
And then
also will the managed workspace save user settings? User settings will get saved to your user preference file or your user configuration file, depending on which setting it is.
And then next one there is still, do we need to copy over the configuration setup config and workspace config files over to program data, Bentley, open road, CE configuration, right?
So that's in the non-managed workspace. When you unzip the file to the C drive, it will automatically overwrite those configuration files. That's part of the zip file. So if you guys are going to put it someplace other than the C drive, you'll need to get into those configuration files and point them to the correct location.
Okay, and that looks like it's got them for the moment. So why don't you go ahead and pick up with AccuDraw, and then we'll take final questions at the end.
Okay. And let me jump back to the other file I was in. I did have a video for this, but I feel like Oak challenged me this morning to do a live demonstration. So hopefully this will work smooth. I'm going to give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. So if you're looking for an efficient and a precise way of placing points, geometry, elements in MicroStation, we used to have a set of tools for GeoPack that did that. I heard DP Station Offset mentioned earlier. That was a favorite. Most of those tools have been replaced now by what we're calling Civil AccuDraw. And this is not to be confused with regular AccuDraw. I've got regular AccuDraw open at the bottom here, but when we get into Civil AccuDraw, this will be closed. It works in a similar manner, but it works with civil elements like alignments. So it's more interactive, it's smart, it's the precision that you're looking for, I think, when you're missing these tools from GeoPack. We'll show, I want to look at where it is, how to use it. We're going to look at how to customize it. So we got a few different things to look at here. And what we're going to do is we're going to set some points. I'd like to make an event point list, show you how that works, and we can cut some cross sections. And then we'll look at how you can lay out geometry with it. That should be a good demonstration here. So how do you find Civil AccuDraw? Well, if I'm in a file and I look and I can't see Civil AccuDraw, it's not popping out to me. The first thing I'm going to do is always go up to the search ribbon. All right. Search ribbon at the top right, you can just start keying in. As soon as I get to Civil, I see down in my list that Civil AccuDraw is here. Right. Now, when I float my cursor over it, I get some options below it. What these are different locations where that tool is on different ribbons. Right. So it starts out with the workflow, and then it talks about which tab it's in, which tool group, and then if it's in any grouping of tools within that tool group. So I could either click on Civil AccuDraw up here, or if I click on one of these links, it's going to set my workflow, it's going to set my tab, and if I look in that tool group, I can find Civil AccuDraw. And we're going to have to turn this off. Oh, actually, I think, let me go back. If I turn this on, yep, it automatically turns off. So you can't have Civil AccuDraw and AccuDraw running at the same time. It will confuse the software. You'll notice if I have my 3D view active and I change to my 2D view, the buttons change. So Civil AccuDraw is going to work differently in each of the different views you've got open. Depending on the type of view, you'll get different options. I'm going to stick with plan view for now. The first button is just toggling it on and off. The second, we've got a drop down. These are some shortcuts. You can pick any of them from the list, or you can hit the Open as toolbox from the bottom. You get the same shortcuts here as you had in the drop down. All right, these are things like the key in. You can set your origin. There are several for rotating the compass. I wanted to look at show shortcuts though. This gets back to what Vaseem showed earlier today. Remember, if he hit quick or hit Q, he got a list of tools. This is where that's set. It's really just these key ins. Or if he hit the space bar, he got the pop-ups. Well, this is where that comes into play. If I hit Q, I'll get a listing here, right? I can pick one, or if I pick a modify, I'll get the whole tool group. I can pick a specific tool. If I hit the space bar, again, icon based instead of text based, but you can pick any of these and you can get the tool group and pick a tool from there. So those are really handy shortcuts that you'll get. Well, actually, you get it with or without Civil AccuDraw, but if you want to see the listing of them, show shortcuts is listed right here. Another thing I want to look at is the Civil AccuDraw settings. Okay, and this brings up a settings box. We've got different tabs across the top, and then within each tab is a set of options. Right, so do I always want to show the compass? Do I want to use my sticky Z-lock? Do I want to auto load Civil AccuDraw? And the tabs, I can uncheck the use default values. If I want, I can change how the compass looks or the constraints look. If you have any trouble seeing colors, this is where you would go to change those colors. I'm going to stick with the default values. Under the coordinates tab, we could key in and lock in a unit round off, distance, angle, station, offset. Indexing, this is like with the AccuDraw you're used to. Do you want it to index to the axis or to the last distance used? And how far off of that does it need to be to I call it grab it. It's kind of sticky as you get to that horizontal or if you get to that last distance used. And then the favorite tab, this has got the different modes that we're going to see up here. We'll come back and look at this in a little bit. Let's take a look at the different modes that we have then. So Civil AccuDraw is going to work with the different geometry tools. You can have horizontal geometry, you can have vertical geometry, you can use it with your regular drawing tools, but these will not place civil elements. I'm just going to use place point. We talked about this a little bit earlier today. Somebody had asked about placing points. If I go through the prompts here, I'm going to reset for my active terrain and set an elevation of 0. Pick my alignment for rotation. But I can see it's looking for distance and direction because that's the mode that I'm set to. I can do an unlinked distance and direction. I can do 2 distances, where I can tab down to my second field and hit O. Now I have 2 distances from 2 separate origins. I can place by XY, delta XY. So if I've already got a place, how far off? And you can see that indexing that we talked about before. We got station offset. Now in this case, I'm going to tab down to the offset field and hit the O key on my keyboard so that I can select. Let's try this again. Select the reference alignment, and now I can get station and offset from that alignment. Or I can do delta station offset from a previously placed point. So the example we were talking about earlier today was placing some right-of-way monuments. And that would happen to be a nice segue into my demo. I've got some right-of-way monuments that I want to place here. The problem is that I've got this set out northing and easting, and we've got XY, right? So if it's XY, I'm going to have to come in and put the easting first and then the northing. Well, I want to put the northing first and then the easting. So I'm going to customize Civil AccuDraw so that I can put it in the way I want. If I come back to the settings, I go to favorites, and here I can add another mode. And I'm just going to call this northing, easting. And from there, I'll set the ordinates. Right now it's set to XY. I want it set to YX. I do that by clicking on it. And if I drop down here, I see these are the list of options I can pick. Now I notice that there's no Y option. There's no Y option because that's already set for the second ordinate. Just like if I click on the Y, there's no X. Right? For those two, you can only have them set in one or the other. So if I change this to distance first, then I get the option to select Y. And now that that's set to Y, I can come back and set this to X. Okay, they're not going to have a common origin. And if I want, I can come through and I can pick, there's all sorts of different icons you can pick to have show up in your mode on Civil AccuDraw. I'm just going to stick with the current one that we have here. I think it tells us what we're going to use pretty well. So I'll go ahead and close that. Now I don't see it on my list here yet. What I need to do is I need to toggle AccuDraw, Civil AccuDraw off and toggle it back on, and it should show up in my list then. And if I click that, walk through the prompts again, set my active terrain, set my elevation, pick my alignment for rotation. Now you can see that I've got Y, X on my heads up prompt, ready for me to start putting in coordinates. If I go back to this one, it switches to XY versus YX. I don't even want to get confused with this, so I'm going to right click and turn off the XY version. And now I'm ready to start keying in. Civil AccuDraw is ready and waiting for you to start entering information. So I'll just start keying in what I've got. And when I hit enter, that locks it in and goes to the next field. I'll hit enter and lock that. I can use my tab key to jump from field to field. If I have a field that's locked, I can use the N key to unlock it. I can go back and use my enter key to lock those. And as soon as I have all the fields locked down, when I move my cursor, it locks in that location. I can left click. Oop, it's not putting it. Let's try this again. Pick my feature definition. I'm going to let it name it. Reference, elevation. Pick my alignment. Key in my location. Huh, it's not letting me place it. I'm guessing that's because I picked a different role. Let me back out. COAK, live demonstrations. Change this back to roadway. Jump in. Now, this is what we were talking about before. I'm going to have to get all the way out and back in to have that role set to roadway. So I'll close it, open it back up. My role was set to roadway already, so when I jump back in, this should fully load roadway. Okay. So we'll go ahead and turn on Civil AccuDraw. AccuDraw closes. Let's go to our point. Make sure we got our feature set. I'm going to use the active terrain. I'm going to pick that alignment. Now let's try this again. There we go. We can see we got our concrete right-of-way monument placed now. So Civil AccuDraw is ready for the next one. I can keep going. 732.154.049, enter. 203.2512.603, enter. Right? And I can just go through and lay out all these points. If I choose halfway through that I don't want to do northing easting anymore, I want to do station offset, I can do that. Now, because it says station 0, I know that it's not referencing my alignment. So I'm going to tab down to offset. I'm going to hit O for origin. And I'm going to pick that center alignment. And now I can see that I've got my station offset. So my next point is going to be 392 plus 98. 180 feet off. And I can just keep going from there. 395.47. 395.47. Now, if I key in just the station and lock it in, 396.93, enter. Notice that it will lock onto that station. I don't know if it's easy to see with that blue, but you can lock in a station and not an offset, and you can just pick an offset. I happen to have one, so I'll key it in. But the same works the other way, right? If I tab down to offset and I key in my next offset and lock that in, I can place anywhere along that alignment then at that offset by snapping to an element or whatever I need to place. I happen to have a station, so I'll key it in. Now, something new with ORD that we haven't seen in the past is that there's intelligence when you place these points. If I select this point, I've got the station and the offset are remembered, right? I can come in here and I didn't want this to be on the left side. I wanted this to be right 180. So I can change it from negative to positive and it will move. In ORD, the idea is you want to modify elements. You don't want to delete and place again because you may have other things that are depending on that element. If I click on an element that we've placed and I go to properties, I'm scroll down to the bottom here and I can see that this point is only constrained by that elevation 0 from our existing ground. I can still get in here and I can change my X and Y values to whatever I need. If I look at the other one that was placed by station offset, this is also constrained not just by the elevation, but also by that offset and station. I cannot go in and change my X and Y values. So there's intelligence now to how these are placed. Questions so far? All right, let me keep going. I'll show you a few more things. This is kind of a neat feature. If I select all these elements, I can do what's called an event point list. The question was, what's the purpose of changing the X and Y designation for northing and easting? Just to make it easier to enter in values. If you want to tab through, you can do it that way also. Once I've got these points selected, I can hit Event Point List. I pick an alignment, and it's going to associate this point list with this alignment. I've got all of these points now set. That alignment knows what they are. And what can we do with that? Well, if I go to drawing production, what we can do is we can cut some cross sections. I'm going to pick my seed here. But when I go to pick that alignment, then it remembers that. Oh, did it not have it? Go back. Oh, we've got it. I must not have picked the alignment. All right. When I go to drawing production and I go to name boundary, pick my seed, pick my alignment, I should have that event point list. There it is. Shows up in my event point list dropdown. I can choose to include those event points only, and what it'll do is it'll cut cross sections at those points that I placed. I'm not going to have it open the model now, but it'll process through. You got your status bar at the bottom. And we should be able to see, there they are. So we've got our boundaries for our cross sections based on those points. And this is what Oak was talking about this morning. You've got your 3D right-of-way monument in your 3D view, and you've got your 2D cell in your plan view. So it's all working together now. And if we look, I now have some sheet models with cross sections in them. Those are based on these drawing models. And this is, we heard a little bit about this morning. This is a direct look at a cut in the model. So if anything changes on the model, it changes here in the drawing view. You can remove and add drawing annotation here. That annotation then shows up in your sheet. Let me go back to multi-model view. Just like we can lay out points, I can come down here, I can lay out an alignment using Civil AccuDraw. Right? I happen to know the PIs for that alignment. I can stretch this in case you're worried. I can dock it. Top, bottom, sides. Let me go back to geometry. Since I have my PIs, I can come over to my complex geometry and I can place a complex element by PI. We'll go through, we'll change any settings we want here. If you've got a specific radius, you can lock it in. If you want to do transitions, you can. These are set to length 0, so we won't get any in this version. Set my feature definition at the bottom. And I'm going to give it a name. This is going to be Y11. And I'm going to lay these out by northing and easting. If I had XY instead of northing easting, I could lay it out that way. If I had whatever the information is, you can lay it out however you want. Let me go ahead and drop these in. Lock that. Lock that. And that's the first point. There's my second point. Now, because we locked in a value for this radius, it's already set. It's just looking for where am I going to put that last point. Place that last point, reset to end, and I've got my alignment. Now, if I select that alignment and do what we call bump, where I get off and get back on, I get this pop-up menu. In that pop-up menu, you'll see a little paperclip. If I pick that, this is going to give me a horizontal geometry report. This would be like what you would see in your GeoPack window when you were done laying out an alignment. You can come in here, you can check all your parameters and make sure they're correct. There's several different reports you can pull. So depending on what you want to see, you can switch back and forth between these. And then if you want, you can always export this out to Excel. So all the functionality you used to have is still there. It's just slightly different. That leaves us about 15 minutes for questions. Oh, one more thing I did want to show you, because this question comes up a lot. Does Civil AccuDraw work with Zoom tools? All right, and at first I did not think it did, but I realize now, let me reset that, and then I'll pick this alignment. If I needed a station offset, let me pick that. So I could key in a station of 525 and an offset of 32, just to pick random numbers. That'll lock that in. If I'm off somewhere else now, and I don't know where it is, I can hit my plus zoom or zoom in, and when I data point, it should take me right to that location. So you can use your Civil AccuDraw with your zoom features like we use DP Station Offset in GeoPack. The trick is that you have to lock the value in first and then pick your zoom tool. So this particular demo you did is what you would use to reconstruct an existing alignment from a set of plans. Yes, that's how I would do it. If I had a list of the PIs, I would just lay those out, and I would use the complex by PI. Now with this unlocked, you can set your radii as you go. So if you've got multiple curves on this alignment, not a problem. Pick your first point, and then as you go, you can set, and you can see it's in the heads up, it's already waiting. So if I want to set this to 1500 instead, I get a different curve. And then you can keep going. Oop, that was a bit of a short tangent. Let me get a larger tangent out here. I'm going to hit N to unlock that 1500. I can put in whatever I need. So hopefully that helps. What other questions do we have? What else would you like to see? What is NCDOT's plan for managing projects done with different ORD schemas? Do you plan on keeping one or two workspace versions and leave file as is or upgrade the projects? It's going to be a project by project basis for that decision, but I would think that we are going to, yeah, that's okay. It's a bigger question, but we're going to have to keep multiple schemas in project-wise so that we can keep it associated with each project. And I'm going to let Elizabeth talk more on that this afternoon since she's the project-wise expert, but it's got to work somewhere along that lines where as you're moving forward in your design, you're not going to want to lose the workspace you've got. So we'll have to keep several schemas running if we've got multiple versions of the software. Does that answer your question? Feel free to unmute and ask out loud if anybody would like. Scroll back through and see if I can find any more questions that I may have missed. Right-of-way monuments should have the flat side of the triangle parallel to the alignment. Oh, that, yeah. You can set your rotation. I just had mine set to 90. So you can set that to 0. Will we be able to use roadway tools in a structures role workspace? If you're in a structures role, you will probably be an open bridge. Am I correct in thinking that? Or are you going to use the structures workspace in ORD? I guess that's my question. I don't think you'd be able to use roadways workspace in open bridge though, if that's the way you were headed with that.
Yeah, I think also too, just speaking ORD, if like photogrammetry load up their role
Mhm.
and want to use roadway tools. Now we have this in the NCDOT workflow to load up other disciplines.
Combos.
Yeah, DGN libraries. So there's a option to load up DGN libraries from another unit. I think the tools itself sits in a GUI DGN library. So as I mentioned, you can load other unit or another workspace DGN library in the 10.10.2078 release, but that's mainly used for feature definition. So if you want to temporarily load up, say I enter as a roadway user and I want to grab a feature definition from surveys, location surveys, I can do that with this new feature in 10.10.2078 release. But as far as the tool which resides in the GUI DGN library, I think in the NCDOT workflow, we have something that can switch DGN libraries, but I don't think the GUI DGN library was one of them that you can pick and choose which one you want to load in addition to what is already loaded.
So you'd have to load the NCDOT all workspace or a combo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can do that.
When you station the alignment, how do you do that? Can you specify a point like equality where two alignments meet? We've got all sorts of different tools here. Under modify, you can set a start station. You can insert your station equations. Usually setting that start station will, you can set it and that'll follow through for the rest of the alignment. Is that what you're asking? You can get station equations in there. So if you have a point of equality, that's what I would do. Okay, great. Any other questions? Hopefully you guys have found this useful. I know a lot of people had questions about Civil AccuDraw. I hope I answered some of them. I'm sure I didn't answer all of them. So
There's
play
one-
around with it. What's that?
There's another quick question there on in the chat. It says,
Could it have done a batch
placing
process?
right-of-way monuments, could it have been done as a batch process?
Sure. If you had like an ASCII file with all of your monuments listed, you could bring that in through a more of a survey routine where you'd bring in the ASCII points. And you can have that define a feature definition, which would set it as a concrete monument.
And then one last one. This one may be a little out of this, but could you explain briefly parametric design and the best way to use them within ORD?
Parametric design is a whole field of study. I don't know if I can give a brief explanation of that. Let me think about that for a future presentation. How about that? Because I'm not, yeah, I don't think we have a lot of time to get into it.
Yeah, I guess a bit beyond the scope at the moment. If we have any questions down the road about drawing and commands, who is the best contact to reach out to? In that case, I mean, reach out to whoever you want to, but I would suggest just sending it to CADD support and see if we can't get somebody to.
Yeah, I would use the CADD support. Here, I got it up on the screen. Either the CADD support email, or if it's project-wise specific, use the project-wise support email. But those are your two best places to go for information. And again, that's because when you send it to one of those addresses, it goes to multiple people. So if somebody is already on a different issue, the next person can grab yours and go.
So I think that's probably about it. We got about 5 more minutes. So as Jeff would say, we'll give you a little bit of time back. You can get that 5 minutes of lunch in there. We want to thank you for attending today's session. And don't forget, we have another one this afternoon at 2:30 to 3:30 on Project Wise. So we hope to see you there and the rest of the sessions all week. So with that, we will go ahead and call it a lunch for the time being. So hope to see everybody later this afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Randy.
Anytime.